Today is December 3rd, 2019. Will you please introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
My name is Sundae Sparkles. I'm she, her, and I am a burlesque performer.
So, where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born and raised in Grants Pass, Oregon. I moved to Portland briefly. I went to floral design school and lived there for a few months, but then I came back.
What did you do in your formative years that led you toward performance?
I was always interested in dance. I was interested in theater, but had a close friend who was very into theater and kind of made the choice that I was going to be the dancer and she was going to be the actress, and stuck with that. So I did ballet and jazz dance and just all that, as much of dance as I could get my fingers on, until I met horses. And then I became a horse girl. And so as much as I was into horses, it was like I wanted the performance aspect there as well. I got into dressage, which is kind of like making your horse dance. So I stuck with those through high school, until I was out of high school, and kind of teetered between dance and horses.
And what formal education or training do you have?
As far as dance or performance, very little. I did some college. I went to design school for flowers, and that's pretty much it. Everything else is just kind of me. All through college, I took every art class I could get my hands on. I grew up in an artistic family, all the way from my grandparents to my parents were both art majors, and grew up in a craft store hobby shop, and married an artist. So, it's like I've dabbled in, if it's artistic or I've touched upon it at some point.
In those formative years, was there anyone who was an influence or an inspiration to you?
I mean, that's just such a vast question. Um, it doesn't pertain so specifically to the burlesque side, but like Alphonse Mucha has always been one of those artists that the beauty and the stylizing and just in general his bodies, the way he painted it, I've always been drawn to. And so I think that when I costume or when I create pieces, that is kind of always in the back of my head, the way that he framed people and pieces and the flow. And then I remember very young, I watched Gypsy and saw Gypsy Rose Lee and was like, I don't know what this thing is, but I love it.
And so, what year and how did you get started in burlesque?
I've got notes for that because that is a convoluted little story. So I started, I had my son in 1999 and was a stay-at-home mom. Hit a point where I just needed something. And so I started belly dancing in 2003 and met Darby Doll and became just immersed in belly dance for years. I competed and did showcases and was very much just loved belly dance. And then through one thing or another, my husband and I reopened a comic book store, and it was beyond full time. We started homeschooling our child, opened a comic book shop, and I stopped doing everything that was not those things, and lost a lot of my passion for my art, I guess is a way of putting it, and kind of it was weird. It was a crazy time. And then in 2008, I saw Tease-O-Rama here in Ashland, and it was the first time ever seeing live burlesque anywhere, and it was amazing. And so that was within that same amount of time, like 2008, we started the comic shop, and I saw that, and
Tease-O-Rama?
Tease-O-Rama, oh man, it was a traveling show that had rotating huge name performers, and I am not completely sure, but I think that they would have people who would travel the entire country with them, and then they would pull in from like the West Coast different people. And I mean, on that, I got to see Satan's Angel with fire tassels and just, I mean, and Catherine Delish and her martini glass, and just, it was amazing. It was an amazing, inspirational thing. But I was at a point where I couldn't do any of that. I was in a coffee shop where you're teaching small children and you're around, all of that. And so it just kind of simmered in the back of my mind. And then we sold the shop in 2014. And I, through my husband's 40th birthday party, I wanted to do something different. He's an artist. His best friend's an artist, and at the time ran an art college in Grants Pass. And so he let us use his space, and I wanted to do different little scenes with different models that they could come and draw or photograph and have like these little vignettes. And in between, I wanted burlesque. And I wasn't at that point myself, but I knew Darby was getting back into it. And so I invited her, and I did a little birthday thing, and she did an amazing fan act. And I went, something, this, and what. And so that was in March of 2014. And I heard about BurlieCon and went, I want to go to that. And
what was that?
BurlieCon is amazing. It's I think the world's only, for certain, the United States only burlesque convention, and it's in Seattle, Washington every fall. At that time, it was in October, and it's 4 days of learning and immersing yourself in the world of other performers and teachers, and it's going into it as a complete newbie was terrifying and amazing. I was by myself. My mom went with me. I was vending. I was supposed to be vending at a convention in Seattle that weekend. And so I said, hey, Mom, you want to go vend for me this whole weekend while I go do this? And so that's what I did. So I went and I just dove in. And coming from an area where there are no burlesque classes, the only closest is 4 hours away in Portland. And you can't drive 4 hours for a weekly class. It wasn't in my budget to be able to figure out a way to do that. So being able to go and have 4 days of learning how to twirl tassels, I had no idea. I'd never had anything in my life that showed me that. Everything from how to sew a tearaway bra. Like I had played with on my own from YouTube videos and like in my own studio, like how can I make these things happen, but didn't have the background of how to create an act that incorporates the tease and those pauses, because as a belly dancer, it's a different, your choreography is a different structure when you have to pause to be able to remove something or pause to create that like tease or that reveal. It's a completely different headspace. And so going in there with no knowledge was just amazing, because I just started sucking it all up. And I took a class from I Have a Handful, and I'm a rock girl. I love pop, but rock and metal is like and so taking a class from her on choreographing and her way was just like, and I remember I came home that weekend and my husband said, I don't know what this weekend was, but you're glowing. Whatever this gave you, I want you to have all the time. It's changed you. And it absolutely did. It was just absolutely amazing. And so the next August, took me from then to August to kind of create and talk with Darby and say, I want to do this. How do I do this here? And we had the opportunity to perform at a horror, they do a horror film festival here in Ashland, or they did at the time at the Armory, and they gave us stage time. And I said, okay, let's do this. And that was my first time on stage. And it was a handful of people in the audience, but it was amazing. And it kind of took off from there. I think that's my little,
So what do you do outside of performing?
I am in manufacturing, but not really. My husband's an amazing artist, and we have come from having a shop and selling the shop to now we are full-time artists. And he is a cartoonist. He does pinups as well, and has made the amazing logos. And so we create from his artwork. We make products, and then we vend. We have a huge booth setup that we do at comic conventions everywhere. We've been doing like San Diego Comic Con for 18 years, I think, something like that. And so we travel. I travel a lot. I'm gone at least once a month, if not a couple of times a month, traveling between up and down the West Coast all the way to, I spent 13 days in Wisconsin this last summer, vending at a fair there, and bounced from there, then drove to Boston and did a week in Boston before coming back. So I'm on the road a lot for work, which makes scheduling shows and this and that. I constantly am like, this would be really fun, but I'm gone. Sorry. So, yeah.
And so you've talked a little bit about the burlesque community, or lack thereof, in this area. So what is this burlesque community like, and how is it different from others?
The burlesque community as a whole is amazing. It's the most inclusive group of people, and I feel like I'm in a relatively inclusive group for my work because comic nerds, there's a camaraderie there that's similar. But burlesque, it's even more so. I don't think that I've met a more just loving group of people ever. Our area being so small and kind of Darby and I and a few of other people who've been here with us from the beginning have built our community. And so it's like we are bringing the performers in almost more than them coming to us and saying, hey, I hear you're producing a show. We'd like to be a part of it, or here's my act, or I'm submitting for that. It's more a matter of kind of helping them grow into some performer that can be a part of our show. And never having been really a part of a different community, I can only touch upon one of my best friends who I met through burlesque lives in Chicago and performs out there. And so I have been to shows out there and know her experience. It's huge in Chicago. I mean, every weekend there are multiple shows. So it's a matter of just, if you're not part of a troupe, you can apply to different shows, look for a troupe that is doing something similar, and being able to just kind of network within that city or even outside of that city. I mean, you're close enough that you can go to Madison or you can go to wherever, and you have all these opportunities, and you can be more niche. You know, if you're a big body performer, there are troupes and shows that are specifically looking for you. Or if you're a person of color, then there are those shows that are looking, you know, versus a variety. Whereas here, we're finding people that have a sparkle and bringing them and helping kind of grow them up to perform, I feel like. So I think that's kind of the difference that we have being in as small of an area as we are here in Southern Oregon. Yeah. Versus even then Portland, again, has multiple shows and variety.
Can you describe that festival circuit and how you apply, how you get into it, what that's like, who pays for what? Just give us a little snapshot.
My festival experience has been relatively limited, mostly because I am already committed on most of the weekends, it seems like. So I've applied for a few festivals, and have performed at the Oregon Burlesque Festival, which was fantastic, just an amazing experience. And being able to go up there with my dance partner, Darby, it was fantastic. It was great. And it's nerve-wracking, even more so than submitting to someone's show that, you know, they're doing a show at this bar and they're looking for an act that's food related. So I'll submit, here are my food related acts if you want me, kind of a thing. A festival has higher stakes, it feels like, because it's bigger and it's more, you know, there's more to it. And so you choose a festival, and you will submit your act video to them and pay the fee, which is on average is $10 to $25. A lot of times, if it's $25, you can submit 2 acts, and they'll choose from those if they want. And then you wait, and you wait, and then you either get the yay or the crushing, and then you go cry in the bathtub, and it's fine. But the festival experience is it's very unique. It definitely brings like a whole different feeling, and I feel like you get to meet performers from further away or from different avenues that you might not meet at just going to a local show, because it's kind of those bigger stakes. I've been lucky enough, I've performed twice at the Seattle Marathon, which isn't per se a festival. It's a show, but it's kind of similar, and it was always just the week or the Sunday after BurlieCon. And so people from all over were there. So it kind of had the same festival feel of being able to perform with people that you might not normally, because they're from Australia or they're from New York or, yeah.
And so traveling to perform, who pays for what? Housing, transportation, all of that?
In my experience, it's always the performer. I'm sure were you to reach the level of a headliner, that changes. Having brought a headliner in, it's a little different. But at the level I'm at, it's all on you. And luckily, it's such a tight-knit community that if you know people, you can always say, crash on your couch, I'm coming out there. And trying to book a circuit. So if you know, I'm going to California and I'm going to do this show, if I can book something on either side of it so that you're hitting 2 or 3, it's definitely. And the few times that I have traveled further, try to book it where I can be out there for work and then stay a week. Or I did Chicago. I did an amazing charity event that a friend of mine puts on out there. That's a hockey tournament during the day, and then it's a burlesque show in the evening. And so I stayed with her and got to go out there for that, and got friend time in, as well as, going to watch hockey and get to perform. So it kind of adds it all together.
So shifting to artistic aspects, what's your process for creating a new piece of burlesque for yourself?
My process is, well, it depends. So sometimes I get just a crazy, weird idea. One of my acts that I'm best known for is my Bigfoot act. Being Pacific Northwest, it just kind of seemed like it fit. And truthfully, I think I was at a costume shop and was with my son and my husband, and they were talking about how they were going to do this art booth where they all dressed as gorillas, and you had to buy your art from the gorilla. And so we were joking around looking at gorilla costumes, and I saw this Bigfoot costume, and I was like, well, if you guys are going to do that, I'm going to make a burlesque act where I end up as Bigfoot. And it was kind of almost like a challenge accepted kind of a thing. And it just sat with me, and it wouldn't leave me alone. And finally I was like, I have to go buy a gorilla costume, which as of right now, I think it's one of my more expensive costumes, just because you're starting with $100 piece of fur. So it's like the concept comes, and sometimes that concept comes from a piece of music, and sometimes you have to find the music that fits. And for me, for that act in particular, the song Believer just kind of made me think, well, I believe in Bigfoot, so it makes sense. And how do you then take your concept idea and the music and tell the story? The way I was kind of taught burlesque structure is that there's 3 things that go into a great act, and that is your movement, your story, and your costume. And if you're strong in 2 of those, one of them can be slightly weaker. But if you have strength in all 3, that's going to give you like the best. And so it's a matter of going, okay, so I have a costume idea. I'm going to start out as an adventurer, and I'm going to end up as Bigfoot. I've got that basic idea there. I have my song that speaks to me and I know makes me excited to move to it. Now, how do I tell a story that the audience can understand with no words, with movement only, that works, especially for us? You never know what you're stage environment is going to be. So I have performed it on a huge stage where I can't get to the audience. And there's a part of it that normally I am interacting with the audience. You're not always able to do that. I've performed it in a dome tent on grass in 110-degree weather at a festival where at the end I'm in a full fursuit and I'm dripping sweat from dancing for the full time. So you kind of have to be prepared, but be able to tell your story that you're making your act around within your 3 minutes to whatever you are end up with, whatever your stage is. So it's a lot of trial and error, and I'm lucky enough to have a lot of creative people around me. So I can run through it and say, is this working? Do you get this? Between my husband and my parents are artistic people. I have friends I can send clips to and say, what am I doing that's not working? How is this? So I feel like that feedback is very helpful. And I think that being able to run through an act a number of times, I've done that one where I can do it in my sleep. I've done it so many times, which then brings about another little, like, okay, it's getting stale. How do I make it new? What do I do to make it fresh again? But I think that for me, that's it. It's like I'm always inspired by something. And how do I expand upon that and bring in sparkles?
So, shifting the topic a little, cultural appropriation is talked about a lot in the burlesque world. How do you define cultural appropriation, and how is that a consideration for you when you are creating performances?
I would define it as someone taking another culture, say a white person taking something from an Oriental culture and being like, now it's mine. I'm going to make this amazing thing with it, and it's fine, with no consideration to the fact that that just isn't. It's just not for you. And coming from a belly dance background, I have really sat with that a lot, because when I started belly dance, that wasn't ever talked about. It was just, you're going there and it's just fine. And you can wear whatever you want. You can, wear a bindi and do these things. And as I progressed in it and finally stepped away from it, that was a big part of it, is just the difference between appreciation and appropriation. I can appreciate the music and I can love the costumes and I can want to know as much as I can about something without having it necessarily become that I'm trying to wear that as myself, as my, I grew up in a non-religious household, but we were very close friends with a Native American family that lived up the road from us. And we spent a lot of time with them and went through a lot of their spiritual experiences, and kind of the same thing. I never would have thought, well, it's okay for me to take upon me that I'm going to do this as my religion now. But being able to go through it with them was beautiful. I feel like that's kind of that same thing, as being able to appreciate it without having it become part of me. And that is always in the back of my head as I'm creating acts. I have a tendency to kind of be a little wacky, so mine don't necessarily, I haven't come across that as a problem so far in my, in something, because generally I'm like, I'm going to be a goose now, or I'm going to be, but I know it is more talked about and more, people are more aware of it in the burlesque community than any other communities I've been a part of. And I appreciate that as in a lot of ways, that I think that burlesque is very aware of the diversity that it is within it, and how to be aware of that, and just kind of, yeah. I don't know if that fully answered it, but
I'm hearing other people talk about respectability politics. Can you describe just a little bit about what that means to you?
ooh, I don't know that I have an answer for that.
Fine. You've already described being in the creative industries, an entrepreneur. What are your skill sets in that?
That is, I'm going to say that being able to have touched upon everything. Growing up not only with an artistic family, but growing up in a hobby and craft store was, I have done everything from, how to put together an RC airplane to full on sewing. My grandmother was a seamstress and I learned to sew with her. And then I went to school as a floral designer and still do that part time. So it's like creativity and taking an idea and finding a way to make it is something that has just been, I've been lucky enough to have be part of my family. And I can go to my parents who are thoroughly supportive and be like, I need help. How do I get this thing to work? Or I need a box to do a cat act on. And my dad's like, okay, I'll build you something. If I don't have time to do it myself. So the skill sets, it's one of those things. If you want to do it yourself, which is the most affordable way, you have to know how to put it together or know somebody who can help. If you can't sew, then know somebody who you can trade. I'll rhinestone this for you if you sew this for me versus, well, just go buy it because it gets so expensive. It was so expensive anyway, but especially if you're buying fully finished costumes fully. I'm not at that point.
People in burlesque have told me it empowers them. What's your take on that?
Absolutely. It is by far one of the most empowering things. And I've always felt very centered in myself and I've always felt very strong in myself. I was a very, very shy child. And the idea, if you told me at 12 that I would be on stage, I would be in ballet, I'd be in the back, and I would be, that would be kind of until I hit about 15 or 16. And actually through 4-H, I joined a group of camp counselors. And as a leader of younger children, you couldn't be that shy, quiet person. And so a lot of the training that we did to be camp counselors, I still fall back on some of those things. And at that time, the ballet troupe that I had been doing things with, I got a solo and I wasn't terrified of it. I was nervous, but I wasn't terrified. And I think those kind of things, they just went in hand of finding that way. And so then, and I grew up in the 80s where it was big hair and big boobs and skinny is what you've got to be. And then, I had a kid and I gained a lot of weight and, from the outside, never felt like I was going to get back to that point, and never felt that way from my family or my husband or any of that. Just, it was always part of that is like, I'm never going to be that skinny, pretty girl again. And had a fellow at a grocery store tell me, with your build, you really should have bigger boobs. And it was like, just that kind of internalizing thing that just kind of sat there. And so getting into burlesque and seeing we are all beautiful and we are all able to get up there and entertain and put on this performance that people are inspired by and entertained by and turned on by. And all of that was just, it was huge. And my first performance was the year I turned 40. And so there was something about that of being on stage, taking my clothes off in front of people at 40, having grown up as a nudist and like never having any body shame that way, but being on stage and saying, no, now you're going to look at me because I want to show it to you. It just was huge. That was being able to step out there that way and show that. there's nothing else that compares to it for me. And I know, talking to other performers that kind of feel that same, when I'm walking down the street, I don't want people to look at me. But when I get on stage, then it's in my control, and you can have what I'm giving you is huge. It's very empowering. That's just the word that is constantly there. Is yeah.
So you've talked about empowerment. You've talked about diversity in the burlesque world. Can you talk, or what are your thoughts about burlesque as a force for social change?
Oh, I think from its origins, it's always been touching on the social politics of the day, and it that's just not going to go away. That stays. As much as there are shows that maybe on the surface look like, oh, it's just about being on stage and being pretty. It's, again, women on stage showing you what they want. It's men on stage showing you what they want. It's non-binary people being on stage showing you, I'm here and you get this from me. That alone is a huge social change. But I think beyond that, it as a community is very aware of the social issues of all of its people, and are very conscious of helping and moving that forward. And I don't know that you could come into this art form. I don't think you would go far in this art form if you weren't aligned with helping and pulling in others, building others up. It wouldn't go as, I just don't think that you would spread as well.
What do you see as the future of burlesque?
I think it has, it's just going to keep getting bigger. I think that it's, as more people learn about it and see shows, and even in the smaller towns, it's just going to continue to grow. I don't think that there's any slowing it down. I think it has so much potential, and it can be so vastly different that if the sparkles and the classic isn't for you, there's going to be a show out there that you can go to, watch, participate in, create, that's dark and gritty and, macabre and blood and, whatever it is that you're interested in, it's out there. And if it's not, then it's time to create it, make it happen.
Yeah. And so, final question, what would you like the general public to know or understand about burlesque?
Short answer is that it is not cheap, and we want your tips. That it is an expensive art form, and that to support the art in coming to the shows and tipping. As a larger answer, I think I'd like the public to know that it is so beautiful and so has so much history and has so much inclusivity from all around, that they are going to come there and they're going to see something that they probably wouldn't see anywhere else. It's going to be something that is inspirational, and maybe something that isn't for them. They may see an act that just is complete opposite. But I think that that's what art is it should make you feel something, and it doesn't necessarily have to make you feel something good. That art can make you feel something that you're uncomfortable with and that you need to sit with and understand why and what it is that it's trying to show you through that uncomfortable moment, and that come back and see if the next time, see what it does for you the next time if you're in a different place. Yeah, give it a try.
Thank you very much.